Hello, thank you for tuning in. This is the first episode of the first season of Garfield County Library's official podcast. Expect to hear a range of topics, both library and community related. The aim is to post one episode every month, so look forward to that. We hope to bring both the library world and the local community to you by interviewing library voices as well as local community voices, so you can hear stories that matter to you. Interspersed throughout each episode will be library plugs ranging from promotions, informational material, and notifications pertinent to the library. With that being said, we thank you for tuning in to the first episode of the Garfield County Library Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Garfield County Public Library District's first podcast.
Hey.
Woo! We're your hosts, Rebecca Rubio and
Sarah Vale.
Since this is our first podcast, we're going to just introduce ourselves and the work we do here at the library. I'm Rebecca Rubio Salazar. That's my full name. I am the Spanish speaker here at Glenwood Springs. I am also the library associate. I usually focus more on youth stuff and a little bit of everything, but mostly youth and Spanish.
Absolutely. So as I said before, my name is Sarah Vale. I am our teen services specialist here at the Glenwood Springs Library. So I've obviously given that focus mostly on teen programming, teen collections, graphic novels, and the like. But just like Rebecca, I do a little bit of everything, including working with our adult services and our youth services on different programs.
Yeah. And so today, for our first episode, we're going to be talking about Shirley Jackson's novels. Two specifically, it's going to be The Haunting of Hill House and
We Always Lived in the Castle.
Exactly. Yes. Thank you, Sarah.
Yes. So not only are we going to be talking about those two pieces of work, we're also going to be talking about their TV and or film counterparts, specifically the TV show on Amazon from The Haunting of Hill House. And then, is it on Amazon?
No, Netflix. Yeah.
Netflix.
No, it's all right. Yeah, Netflix. I think
so.
it was a very popular thing when it first came out, but I think that after a couple of the other seasons that they did within that kind of small universe that they have, it was kind of lost in the mist.
Lost in the mist. And then We Always Lived in the Castle, the Hulu film adaptation.
Yes, Hulu film, yeah.
So I will go ahead and start out, give a little bit of context. We should probably mention at this point, spoilers ahead. If you don't want to know what happens in these books, we are going to be talking about the books at length. Go and read them real quick. They're available on our digital resources, and I believe we have some physical copies as well in the collection.
Yes, and if not, we can always order them for you at the library. Just ask your librarian, or you can go online onto GCPLD.org.
Absolutely. But that being said, these were published in the 60s, so it's been some time. So warnings listed. I'm going to go ahead and talk about the actual books. So the first book we mentioned, The Haunting of Hill House, is a book by Shirley Jackson. It follows a character named Eleanor, whose mother recently just passed away, and she's looking for a new adventure. She gets a letter from a paranormal doctor who's studying this haunted house. He writes a letter to Eleanor because she had a paranormal experience. She had a paranormal experience as a child, so he thinks she might be a good fit for this investigative team. He ends up inviting 4 people. Eleanor is one of them. Another one is a woman named Theodora, the heir to the house whose name is Luke, and then the doctor himself. In the book, they are all complete strangers, all coming in due to various different talents. Throughout the book, we see different psychological things happening to the characters, weird, spooky things, writing on the wall, blood dripping, voices coming in, places of different temperatures. And at the end of the day, by the end of the book, Eleanor has become enthralled with the house and doesn't want to leave. The other characters try to force her to leave, and she kills herself. It's a little bit sad, but it's an interesting narrative. And we'll talk a little bit more about some of the nuances to that as we get into our discussion. The second book that we are talking about is We Always Lived in the Castle, which follows the sad story of 2 sisters and their dying Uncle Julian as they live in a house in a small town. The small town is not a fan of the family, as a few years prior, the whole family was murdered by arsenic in the sugar, with the exception of Uncle Julian, who managed to survive. Mary Cat, the main character, and Constance. While Constance was originally blamed for the murders, they couldn't have enough evidence, or they couldn't find enough evidence against her, so they eventually acquitted her, but the whole town has never really forgiven them for the mass murder. You follow as Mary Cat and Constance are faced with a new challenge, which is their cousin Charles coming in to try and make them leave the house, which they are both very hesitant to do at first. He eventually gets Constance on his side, but Mary Cat, due to her own self-isolating tendencies, as well as some things Uncle Julian says, is far less trusting of Charles, and she ends up being right. The house ends up burning down in a I would say tragic accident, but it wasn't an accident. Mary Cat burned down the house to try and get Charles out of there. And we find out the true intentions of Charles, which was simply their money. The girls end up hiding in the forest for a while and then live in the shelled remains of the house at the end of the book, very tragically. Mm-hmm. All right. So those are the summaries of the books. Rebecca, the TV shows.
Awesome. Yeah, I did. I watched the TV show and the movie. The movie was a while, but yes. Mm-hmm. So The Haunting of Hill House is very dramatically different from the film, just because the book, I know from what you've just spoken about, is mostly about Eleanor, who is going through this journey by herself. She's not related to anybody that is in the house within her. However, the ending of her story is relevant to the show, just because she does end up committing suicide at a certain point in the series. It's actually within the first couple of episodes that she commits suicide, and a lot of what is revolved around in the series is a family where Eleanor is the youngest in her family, and her siblings are actually the characters within the book.
Oh, interesting.
Yes. And I think that's the biggest difference, is the fact that it's a family rather than it is a bunch of strangers all coming together.
Absolutely. And I look forward to talking about the differences in themes. But the movie, We Always Lived in the Castle, how did that compare to the book?
Hello, hello, hello. Beginning January 4th, our service hours across our district will be changing. The new hours will be based off of a year's worth of visitor data to better match community use, so we can be open when most people want to visit. The total hours across the district aren't changing. We've just shifted them to better serve you, our patrons, and our communities. As such, all of our libraries will now open earlier. Library branches that serve larger populations will be open longer, while those branches that serve smaller populations will maintain core service hours. No, there won't be any staff layoffs, though some positions may be adjusted to better match the new operating hours. Don't worry, all of our services remain open, and you can expect to still access everything within our collection. We're also planning to add hold pickup lockers at the Silt, Newcastle, and Parachute libraries, so you can pick up your items at times that are most convenient to you, even when the library is closed. We will still offer robust programming for all ages at various times of the day. We understand that change can be difficult, but the changes to be implemented this January 4th are to better serve you, our patrons. We thank you from everybody here at GCPLD.
It's true to the book, straight from the book into the series. I think the only difference is, when you see a film, it's going to be a lot different from the book within the interpretations of the actors, their behaviors, their tone, especially with how it's portrayed in the book within the film.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. So moving on to some of the themes of the book, we should probably give some context on Shirley Jackson. I should have better notes written down here, but you gave kind of a description. Shirley Jackson was a writer in the 50s and 60s. She specifically writes domestic horror, which is, so to say, horror books that are located in the home. A lot of them center around women's issues and raising children and keeping the house and the fight for independence during this time versus what society expected of you. And you can see these in the books very, very well. As I mentioned before, The Haunting of Hill House starts with Eleanor finally getting a piece of freedom for the first time really in her entire life. And it ends up not great for her. The context of Hill House is that it was originally owned by an eccentric man who didn't treat his children very, very well. And he was also very eccentric and odd, and he built this weird house. And you're never really sure if maybe it's the spirit of the original owner that's haunting it, or if it's from one of his daughters who lived in the house afterwards, who was either tragically murdered or jumped off the bell tower. It's never really decided what officially happened. It's kind of up in the air. But one way or another, there's this theme around Hill House of trying to escape from your life and end up being trapped there. And Eleanor very much becomes subject to these whims, whereas the other characters seem to kind of escape it.
Yeah.
How does that translate versus the TV show?
The TV show is completely different, really.
What's the TV show about?
Yeah, so it's this family loses their mother at a very early age. All the children are very young. And so their mother dies within the haunting of Hill House, literally. And then, but she dies because of the consequences of the hauntings.
Yes.
So, and early on, you see that the person who is blamed is their father, and a lot of them are estranged from their father because of what happened. And some of the kids do not blame their father; they blame the hauntings, except for one of their sons. And he ends up blaming, and I can't remember his name, but yeah, he was the oldest one, and he actually ended up blaming his father for the murder of his mom. But in reality, the true meaning of it is that he can't cope with the grief, and he just like his siblings actually went through the entire experience of being haunted in that home. But because of how heavy the grief and the loss and the trauma of all of that was, he completely blocks it out and coughs it up to being just like, you were all just a little bit crazy. There's mental illness within our family. Our mother was also sick. And he tends to blame people and create a logic behind everything rather than actually blame the hauntings on ghosts and myth like his siblings do. And it's actually very weird considering the fact that one of his sisters has, Theodora has the ability to actually touch and feel things and have kind of these moments where she remembers or sees what victims and other people have seen. Yeah.
The thing that's interesting about the book is the reason Theodora is invited into the house in the first place is because she is also a psychic, or at least allegedly. But she does it more through feeling, whereas later on in the book, the doctor's wife, who is also a psychic, but she's more of a what you would imagine from like a cartoony stereotype. Like she has what's it called?
The Ouija board.
The Ouija board, and she says she can commune with the spirits, and she's a lot. The wife is a lot more like that in terms of like touching things and remembering what happened before. Yeah. But it's kind of portrayed in the book as kind of wacky, and she doesn't actually know what she's talking about.
Yeah.
How is that different in the show?
Theodora is actually a child therapist. So she uses this a lot to her advantage. And one of the first cases that she does dive into is a little bit sensitive, and she kind of figures out immediately that one of the children is going through a traumatic experience within her own home, and she figures it out, and she saves a lot of kids. However, she still deals with the grief and the trauma of getting close to people. And she actually lives with her older sister, too. But Eleanor, being her younger sister, they all get the call that she has suddenly passed. And so Theodora doesn't want to learn about why she passed. But she, once because her older sister actually is a mortician, and she, embalms people, and she said, I'm going to embalm Eleanor. That's what she says immediately. And Theodora was very against it. She's like, you don't want to do this. Like, she's her sister. How could you do that? But Theodora also comes around to wanting to see what really happened to Eleanor.
Interesting.
And when she actually touches Eleanor and she, gets the full story of how she died and why she committed suicide, it's not that she committed suicide, but it's that she's been haunted by herself this entire time. Eleanor was actually being haunted by the ghost of her future.
Interesting. A weird twist of that.
Yeah, because Eleanor, since she was a kid, actually sees herself, she sees a woman hanging in front of her. And it's the woman with the crooked neck is what she called her as a kid.
Yes.
And she ends up being the woman with the crooked neck. And when she dies, she starts seeing pasts of herself.
Interesting.
So she drops into another reality where she sees herself as a kid, and it's her kid self seeing her the first time she ever sees the crooked neck lady.
Interesting.
Yeah, and she actually did not commit suicide.
So in the book, it's almost seen as like a metaphor, or maybe not a metaphor, but a comparison of Eleanor relates to this woman that died in the house before.
Yeah.
Whereas in the show, Eleanor is the woman.
She is the woman in the house. Yeah. She dies within the home.
Yes.
She goes through kind of a psychosis where she immediately goes back to the home. It's been abandoned, but it's still under their family's name. And so she goes in there and she accidentally trips because she is seeing herself with her husband who had already passed before.
Oh, man.
And he had passed from an aneurysm. And it was because when he had the aneurysm, she was having a vision of the crooked neck lady.
Oh, interesting.
And when she goes back to the home, she envisions she's being welcomed by her family. Everybody's there as their younger selves. Her mother's there, her father's there, and she's dancing with her lover. But then when she falls off the balcony, she commits suicide.
The thing that's interesting is Eleanor, at the end of Haunting of Hill House, almost kills herself before she officially kills herself, unintentionally, in a bit of psychosis.
Yeah.
She's climbing up this rickety staircase that's abandoned, which is where the other woman died before, whether by suicide or not.
Really?
But the other characters come and catch her and say, we need to get you down from there, you're going to die. And that's what motivates them to try and get her to leave. What actually causes Eleanor to die is as she's driving out, she's like, I refuse to leave. She turns her car into a tree. Smacks into it. Sorry.
No, yeah, that's wild. I think a lot of the themes, or I guess a lot of the tradition of the character is carried into the
it seems
personalities.
Like, pun intended, the spirit of the book
right.
is brought into the show, but it's more the themes themselves versus the actual narrative.
Right, yeah.
At the end of the day, what would you say the moral of the story of the show is?
I think it's because at the end, what really happens, what kind of brings the catalyst of everybody back together, is the brother finally realizing that it was real and it was just grief. So I think the entire theme of it was just grief and loss and coping with that kind of sense of he didn't only lose his mother, he lost his father. He lost a sense of family, a sense of connection, a sense of unity. And in the beginning you see him and he's separated from his wife, but because they can't conceive children, because of how sad and how he's still grieving such a past of his life, and he's terrified of creating a family and it happening to him again. And not until after he processes that does he actually begin a family with his wife.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I would also say the book is about grief. And to be clear, this is my personal opinion here. There are probably others who disagree with me, but as a caveat. But I would say the thing is, it's about grief, but it's about grief in a different way. Once again, going back to who Shirley Jackson was, she did not lead a very happy life.
Yeah.
And I think she let out a lot of her misery and her desire to live a different life through her novels. And Haunting of Hill House very much feels one-to-one with that, with Eleanor.
Yeah.
But it's about Eleanor not knowing her place, not knowing where to go, not knowing if she has any future at all, because her whole life has been taking care of others.
Yeah.
So while it's different, I find it interesting how at the end of the day, the moral of the story still came back to the same thing, despite how different they were.
And you know what, now that we're kind of diving into it, I feel it's taking it's going to be very weird how I make this analogy, but the same way, how Disney has created the Grimm brothers fairy tales and created Disney's kind of it's great ending,
happy and fluffy and what have you.
It's instead of that now, it's more I feel like these adaptations that they're doing of Shirley Jackson, except for We Live in the Castle.
We'll talk about it in a minute.
Yeah. Hunting of Hill House is more of kind of like Disney's perception of how they take, or I guess or the way Disney takes the Grimm brothers tales and they turn them into these fairy tales.
Yeah,
that's what the director of Haunting of Hill House did with the Haunting of Hill House of Shirley Jackson, except in a more complex and nuanced way, where it's like, I feel from understanding Eleanor in the book, it seems like they sliced her character and her personalities into a family.
It seems so because it seems like a lot of the spirit of the other characters also kind of gets lost, because like I said, the doctor's wife kind of gets placed on Theodora. Theodora is this very confident, self-independent woman, even in the book. Luke is this heir, and he's this arrogant, cocky kind of guy, but he's pretty fun and he's fairly caring from what it seems like, even though all of them are so mean to Eleanor, which you have to question whether or not it's Eleanor losing it or whether the people are actually mean.
Right, you have to believe if it's her own psychology and her psychiatric problems that she's having within the whole book, that maybe a lot of what was happening was just in her head.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Which kind of relates back to the protagonist's issues in the TV show, where he's like, well, everything is in our head. So it's almost a subversion of it.
It's really well and complex. And, going back to Luke, he actually is in the show too, where he's actually Eleanor's twin brother, and he's almost on the brink of death as well. and it's towards the end, and that's how the siblings kind of unite together.
Interesting.
Is trying to save him because he was going to go into an overdose. And it is because they entered the Red Room, which I know the Red Room is also very important in the book.
Yeah, the
right?
Red Room also exists in the book. The book has, again, this house is built in a really strange way. Like, all of the rooms have a different color to them.
Yeah,
and
the
different
green
weird
room,
things happen in different things. And the nursery is by far the most haunted room in The Haunting of Hill House, which originally, the thing that's interesting is originally, so there was the guy who built the house, and then he had his 2 daughters who hated each other, but they were sisters that lived in the nursery. So I think it's interesting that Eleanor is a twin. I'm wondering if that's a connection there.
Right, yeah. Well, Eleanor and Luke were so close, and when Eleanor died, Luke kind of stopped cold turkey with his drug addiction and ended up wanting to, try to figure out what happened to her, and everybody's kind of shunning him like, what do you want? You're a junkie. And they're very mean to Luke, and I hated that, but it's kind of him having this overdose and returning to the Red Room, which the Red Room is, what I'm getting is kind of like the nursery. The Red Room was in the show, it's created kind of like the place where everybody goes to, all the kids go to, and it transforms in whatever they want it to be.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I think the Red Room, and I could be wrong here, I believe that is actually the room that Theodora is staying in, which at one point in the book, once again, spoiler, blood starts dripping from the walls and gets all over her. Just hit the microphone. Blood gets all over the walls and all over her clothing, and Theodora has a minor freak out about it. So it's interesting how they seem to take themes, but not actually, or not themes, settings, and kind of extrapolate on the themes.
Right, yeah.
Another interesting point, Luke is also an addict in the book, but he's an alcoholic. But but instead of it being seen as a negative thing, it's seen as just, it's the way he is.
Yeah, like a very blasé, it's fine.
I think it brings out a good point of, the Haunting of Hill House TV show, I think, is a much better analogy or a much better allegory for the modern times.
Yes.
There are things that have changed about it that fit more modern problems, whereas Haunting of Hill House was beautiful for its time, and I think it's still a great book.
Yeah.
It's definitely, I think the TV show hits on more modern issues while still keeping true to some of the themes of the original book.
Yeah, and I think you're 100% right on that, because I think one of the things that you kind of see within nowadays is like kind of that loss of connection within people. You're starting to see the loneliness epidemic within so many generations of people, whether you're a senior, you're an adult, a young adult, kids are going through the loneliness epidemic. Like, I think it's kind of like reflecting on that and kind of making it its own horror film, because a lot of this is all of these individuals in the family going through the loneliness, going through that kind of like, heartbreak.
I'm getting goosebumps a little bit because it goes from just Eleanor is lonely to the family is lonely.
Yeah, they're all very isolated. It's like they're united, but they're isolated from each other.
Going back to what we were saying of the moral of the story being grief. It's this, how do you parse with not knowing where you're going with your life, feeling isolated, feeling alone, feeling like you have no one else to turn to.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that despite how different the stories are between the book and the movie, that still ends up being the main problem.
Yeah. I think it's grief evolving, and these, it's grief evolved. Like, the grief that you see in the book is going to be completely different from the grief that we're seeing nowadays.
Absolutely.
And its reflection into the film, show.
Hola, a partir del 4 de enero los horarios del distrito cambiarán. Los nuevos horarios se basarán en las necesidades de nuestras comunidades. El total de las horas en que las bibliotecas estarán abiertas se han basado para servirte a ti, a nuestra comunidad. Por lo tanto, todas las bibliotecas abriremos más temprano, pero dependerá de la necesidad de la comunidad a qué hora cerraremos. No habrá despido de personal, pero sí ajustaremos nuestros horarios para servirte a ti, nuestra comunidad. No te preocupes, todos los servicios estarán disponibles igual que siempre, pero ahora nos acomodaremos más a ofrecerte nuestra colección. También estaremos agregando casilleros que estarán disponibles a cualquier horario que tú estés. Estos estarán disponibles en la biblioteca de Silt, de Newcastle y de Parachute, para que puedas obtener tu material cuando te sea conveniente a ti. Seguiremos ofreciendo programación para todas las edades. Asegúrate de revisar nuestras páginas de internet. Entendemos que los cambios pueden ser difíciles, pero te aseguramos servirá y será mejor para toda la comunidad. Te damos gracias por ser parte de nuestras bibliotecas del condado de Garfield.
And then moving on to We Always Live in the Castle as a contrast. Personally, I loved We've Always Lived in the Castle far more than I liked Haunting of Hill House.
Yeah.
I think it's a horror story that still stands as it is on its own. And I think that's probably a good reason for why the movie itself is not much different.
Yeah.
What would you say the moral of the movie would be?
I think
Or would you? Is there a moral, really?
I think to me, it was kind of like, the way I saw it, and I think we've talked about this outside of the podcast, is just how the casting kind of like made me view it a little bit differently how you viewed it from the film.
We have been talking before we came on about this, specifically about Constance.
Yeah, and it's kind of, for me, at least just by seeing this actress' face, and the fact that like she kind of, to me, has always given off this like, I don't want to be here, which you kind of related it to the fact that it's the family's kind of way of being, you know, because they're rich.
In the book, we're really viewing the family through Mary Cat's eyes. And to be clear, Mary Cat's a psycho. And I don't say that lightly. Like, she's genuinely a murderous psychopath.
She's psychotic, yeah.
And, but the only people she cares about in the world are Constance.
Yeah.
And kind of Uncle Julian.
Yeah.
And it's only because of the fact that Uncle Julian kind of meets her or agrees with the things that she wants in the book. And so that's something that she kind of comes to throughout the book versus her actual opinion at the beginning.
It's like an indifference. That's how I saw it. It's like she has an indifference to her uncle and in the film, and she's just kind of like, you're here. I guess you got to be with us. You got some good points, but that's it.
But that being said, Mary Cat views Constance as this like ray of sunshine, this like beautiful glowing light that just gracefully walks down the stairs. But that's not how the townsfolk view the family at all. They view Constance as this evil murderer, as they assume she's the one that murdered the family. But in general, the Blackwoods, the family that these people belong to, were this very rich, arrogant family that were already like having problems with the town before the murder happened because of issues of wealth. And I feel like in the movie, it's interesting how Constance ends up becoming, or she gets this portrayal as being more aloof, because that's probably how the townsfolk would have seen her, versus in the book, we don't really see Constance that way because we're looking at it through Mary Cat's eyes.
No, and I think Mary Cat just, and I had heard somebody talking about this too, is she looks more maniacal and like crazy and just like disheveled. And like, it's from what I've understood is like, that's true to the book, like, but I think what a lot of people have perceived from the book is that she's going to be this like innocent kind of, not innocent, but like this childlike crazy lunatic instead of this adult lunatic who's constantly with her sister.
Well, the thing is, you have to think about at the very beginning of the book, Mary Cat's the only person that goes into town. Uncle Julian is sick enough and is far enough in his what we kind of, or what I read as dementia. Even though it's also just poison induced from the fact that Mary Cat tried to kill him several years prior. But Uncle Julian's way too sick to leave the house, and Constance is terrified of leaving the house. So Mary Cat's the symbol of normalcy almost in that family. She's the one that goes into town, and while obviously the town folk treat her like she's a monster, because admittedly she kind of is, she is the more put together one of the three of them, which I find is an interesting subversion, even though I think the movie, I think it's a necessity to kind of portray them more as they are visually than you have to do in a book, because as a book you're learning about the characters through description, versus in a movie you're learning about a character through visual sight.
Without a doubt. I think like it's like I was telling you, cast really plays a very big role into how they're portraying the story and all that kind of stuff, because I think, what's her name? Tessa Farmiga is very much a very good actress, and she's very into the horror genre, and I love her and everything that she does. But I feel like they should have given the role to somebody who looked a bit more kind of like, younger. You know what I mean? And she has the looks of somebody who's young. Without I think she's in her 30s, and she looks like she's 19. So
I will say I don't know if I agree, just simply because I think it's such an interesting way of portraying the family, of having this like arrogance and this kind of like uppityness that we don't see in the book necessarily until a little bit later on, when Constance has tea with a family friend. I say lightly because they don't really have friends, that's trying to convince Constance to leave the house and live a life again and get married. And after they leave, Constance is like, I never want to speak to these people again.
Oh, gosh. Yeah, you know what? And it's maybe because I've been reading those books, the Harry Potter books, and I keep mentioning it, and I know I mumbled it, but it's because it honestly reminds me of the Malfoy family.
Oh, absolutely. 1,000% the Blackwoods are a Malfoy equivalent, only in a more contemporary setting.
Pure-blooded, has money, is like these rich people, but they're also very like haughty and just like, don't look at me.
I don't have the quote down here, but if I'm not mistaken, there actually might be a point where Mary Cat's talking about the way her mother described the townsfolk, and I think it was literally they were impure.
Oh, of course. Were we talking to Lucius himself?
a little bit, it seems, the vibes.
Yeah, but it's so crazy that Mary Cat murders her family.
The reason Mary Cat murders her family in the book is because she gets in trouble. Yeah. And she's like, well, if I'm going to keep getting in trouble, then I'm just going to remove the problem. She goes, I know Constance doesn't eat sugar. I'm going to put arsenic in the sugar. The only reason Uncle Julian survives, and we find this out in the book as well, a character comes in named Charles, who is their cousin, who comes in saying that he's there to rescue the family, but he's actually there for the wealth. And we learn more about him through Uncle Julian, surprisingly, because he keeps mistaking him for his brother who passed away. And what we learn is his brother was letting Uncle Julian and his wife stay in the house, but only if they ate just tiny amounts of food. So the reason Uncle Julian survived is because he ate his normal allotment of food, which was near nothing, so he didn't get as much arsenic as everyone else did.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
But that being said, it's interesting how the trauma he was going through kind of saved him there. Yeah. And going into the moral of the story of the book, it's really, once again, about isolation almost. And this idea that the only people you can trust are like your very close family and no one else, everyone else is out to get you. And I'm not sure if that's the message necessarily that Shirley Jackson was trying to get across in the book, but it's very much like Mary Cat is the protagonist, and pretty much every single time, every single negative thing she thinks about someone ends up becoming true. Yeah. And it's a little bit sad, but it really leads to this idea of like, we're better if we just don't interact with people and we just stay alone.
Yeah. I'm wondering if like, and this might be, my own thing, but you know how they say like, things will come to fruition if you really continue to see it that way. And you know how they keep seeing her as a witch and stuff like that. But I don't think it's kind of pertains to, magic and all that kind of thing.
Even though she is a witch in the book.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's more of like, people are going to be what you make them out to be. Yes. And it might have been the same thing where in Haunting of Hill House. It's just all in Eleanor's head.
You have to wonder how much of it, like, there is a certain degree, something I mentioned to you, but we haven't talked about yet on the podcast. We Always Live in the Castle didn't end the way I expected. Yeah. There was a part where Mary Cat burns down the house to try and kill Charles, unsuccessfully. And that's where we find out that he truly is just after the wealth. And the townsfolk just like raid the house when this fire is happening, just like destroy it. And afterwards, the book continues. I would have expected the book to end there, and it doesn't. And Mary Cat and Constance are out hiding in the estate, and people are coming out finding them being like, hey, maybe we were a little too mean.
We were being harsh.
And it's the first time we see just like a glimpse of maybe things aren't as bad as they're making it out to be. Yeah. But it's very interesting of like wondering, is it all really just in Mary Cat's and Constance's head? Are they really so hated? Or is it just from this mindset of, oh, we're better than everyone, so everyone hates us because of that?
And you know what? It's kind of like the domestic horror theme. It's like how, and because, Shirley Jackson is kind of like playing into the fact that you're creating these limits yourself. If you truly wanted to get away from your problems, really trying to like move forward, and not have the past hold you back, then you have to completely let go of that. You have to completely let go of that kind of like, baggage. And I think it's kind of, it relates a little bit to Haunting of Hill House, where people, they have this baggage and they're not moving forward in their lives. And it kind of makes you think, like, really it's domestic horror, because you're holding yourself back. It's such a small problem that you could fix it yourself and be like, you don't like me? I'm leaving then. Bye. Skedaddle. Get out of town. Which, I mean, of course, it's not how it goes in the film, but in the book either. But nonetheless, for me personally, because how I see things, if there's a problem, I'm not going to stay around, and it's consistent. I'm not going to stick around and deal with it. Like, what's the point of dealing with something that's not going to move?
Well, you have to think about Shirley Jackson in the 60s, from both societal convention and also the very real thing of women couldn't even have credit cards and had a hard time getting a bank account.
Yeah.
They couldn't necessarily solve some of those problems.
That's true.
Shirley Jackson couldn't get out of her marriage despite the fact that he was actively cheating on her, and was not the kindest to her. I'll put it that way for sake of brevity. And it's very clear that she was a little bit haunted by the role that she was forced into.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting how the show, because it's a modern interpretation, gives the idea of, like, there is an out. There is a way to move past it, whereas the books end both very tragically. I mean, they are horror. It's what one would expect. But
and I think and that's the horror part of it, I think, personally, is, like, the fact that they have to live in this reality. They have to live in that kind of complexity of, we're women. We can't really do much other than just stick around. And it's a very sad truth for that time, But, and I think that's why I like the show so much, is because it's kind of going against the book at that point. Because I did read some of the book, just for readers or for listeners' knowledge. I did read some of it. I didn't read the entirety of it. But it was the fact that it takes such a modern take of, like, you can get past this, and, like, now that there's so much more liberty to people, no matter their gender or anything, it's kind of like, take the advantage while you can.
Absolutely.
And I think that's the beauty of it. And it's so sad to think that Shirley Jackson had to go through that kind of limitation and, hold back.
Go through all of that. But it's beautiful that we're able to interpret it the way we are now.
Yeah.
But to wrap up this segment for sake of time, what would you say about Shirley Jackson? Would you recommend people watch the show, the movie? Would you say, nah, it's not worth the watch?
I think you should watch the show. The movie is just the same as the book, so just, if you really want to give it your own take, give it your own little style, I would say read the book.
I am of the opinion, absolutely. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, and also read the book of The Haunting of Hill House, because it's good. It's her early writing. It's not the greatest, but it's good.
I would say, if you take nothing from this, read We Always Live in the Castle. If you're a horror fan, you can see how it inspired books going forward. It's a beautiful domestic horror. It's really well written. Haunting of Hill House, it's a little jumpy at parts. It's a little confusing at bits, but I still would recommend the read. You can very much see how The Haunting of Hill House ended up setting up other domestic horror and, quite frankly, haunted house stories going forward. It wasn't the first haunted house story. I did check that up. But it was one of the, like, quintessential, like, when you think of a haunted house, you think of Haunting of Hill House.
Yeah, you think of, And I think that's, I think I had read somewhere that the director really loved it. It was kind of like the original horror.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, and that's why he was motivated to take on the job, but also take his twist on it, which I honestly, again, I love that show. It was one of my favorite shows. I love watching it during the Halloween season, starting in September. Yes. Let's go on. Let's get it on Netflix. Get a blanket. You're warm in an air-conditioned home, or it's just freezing outside. You never know.
Thank you for joining us for our book discussion. Next time we're going to be talking about The Hunger Games and the film versus book adaptations there. But now we're going to transition into an interview with our executive director, Jamie LaRue.
Yes, very exciting, and we'll see you guys in the next segment.
Woo!
Quick intermission here before we get to Jamie's talk. One of my personal goals as the social media and events specialist here at Garfield County Libraries is to encourage more online social media engagement with you, our patrons. And so to that end, I'm issuing a call to arms of sorts. I encourage anyone who is at any one of our 6 branches, at any of our events, outreach, programming, whatever, to take a selfie, take a photo of yourself at the events and tag us in the post online. And at the end of every month, we will take our favorite posts and then put them in a kind of fun, reflective collage that we will then post on our socials. Just as a way of thanking you, our wonderful patrons. We truly couldn't do this without you. 2025 was a phenomenal year, and we look forward to going into 2026 with just as much heartfelt joy and love for you as you clearly have again and again shown us. So from the bottom of our hearts, thank you.
Jamie, thank you so much for joining us today. We're happy to have you be our first interviewee. So if you want to start off, please introduce yourself. What's your name? What do you do?
Okay, well, my name is Jamie LaRue, and I feel like I have to get this out of the way at the beginning. I have this dental implant kind of thing, and so I will be lisping throughout the course of this thing. So
I think we can forgive you for that.
We're making history for that.
We're making history, really great history.
So I have now been a librarian for like 43 years.
Wow.
And it really was a calling for me. I felt like from the first time I saw a bookmobile, it's like, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. Mm-hmm. I could not believe that, when I walked into the bookmobile, Mrs. Johnson, quintessential librarian, looked at me like I was the man she'd been waiting for all of her life. And she started off with, how can I help you? And I said, well, I've been reading comic books, and I read about the speed of light. And I said, how did they figure out that light had a speed? Mm-hmm. I thought it was like on or off. Yes. And then how did they figure out how fast it was? Mm-hmm. And at that time, my experience with adults was they would say, brush you away and say, oh, that's so stupid. Why do you want to know this? And Mrs. Johnson, her whole face lit up, and she was like, what a fascinating question. Let's find out. Yeah. And I felt like had me at hello.
Yes.
And so I wanted to be one of those people that greeted every curious child with, so glad you're here. What are you interested in?
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah. All right, and for the second question that we have for you, what's the most challenging part of your role and the most rewarding?
I think it's always going to be people. Mm-hmm. And so the challenging part is that everybody has their own story, and you don't really know what motivated them to do what exceptionally good or exceptionally bad thing they did.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so it's like that's the challenge, is to say, unpack all that, figure out why someone is the way that they are. And then I think, the greatest reward is seeing those people grow. Mm-hmm. And I remember that going from a frontline staff, and I started off as a page, and then I was a circulation clerk. It was always so much fun, and every day you get some kind of reward. So, you give somebody the right stuff, and they're so grateful, and it's like, I feel good. And then you become a supervisor, and you lose that reward.
Oh, yeah.
And so I found that the people that make the transition from frontline help to an administrator are the ones that learn to say, I'm not just helping you, the public, I'm helping you, the staff.
Yeah.
And I get to see you grow. So,
Absolutely. What's the most rewarding part of your role?
I suppose ultimately it's this idea that I think that we are an institution of transformation. Mm-hmm. And I go back again, Mrs. Johnson, by the time I got to be fifth grade, come in the library, and now she's working at the young adult section. And she says, Jamie, I've saved a book for you. And I go, oh, okay. And she handed me the Dialogues of Plato.
Nice.
Who would do that to a fifth grader? And it's like a librarian. And I sat down with that book, and it's like I remember opening it up, and it said, and Socrates asked, what is wise? And I've been thinking about it ever since.
Oh, what a question to start out with.
It's transformed my life. Yeah. And I think that how cool is it that we're an institution that no matter where you are in your life, no matter what your background is, you can find transformation here.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Moving on to a slightly different question that I think, or rather we thought patrons might be interested in learning more about. How do you prioritize investments financially for the library, like staffing, technology, or facility upgrades? How do you make those decisions?
Well, I think the bottom line is that, having watched the industry for a long time, the number one expense, the greatest value, the most important asset of a library is staff. Mm-hmm. And so every library spends somewhere between 35% at the lowest in very, very poor libraries, up to 85%. Mm-hmm. And that's mostly for like municipal libraries. We spend kind of the sweet spots around 60%, because as an independent library district, we pay for things that some public libraries don't. Like we have to pay for our own attorney, our own buildings, our own facilities, that kind of stuff.
Absolutely.
So the most important thing is staff. And then after that, it's materials. You come to a library to get stuff, right?
Books,
and
obviously.
and that's anywhere from a low that I've seen of about 4%, way too low, to a high of about 20. And we're floating somewhere between 8 and 9% right now.
Nice.
Okay.
And then I think after that, so you take those two together, and suddenly it's like you're up at 70%, and the remaining piece of it, it's going to be facilities, because you have to maintain the building, and then it's going to be all those things that you have no control over. We have to do facilities maintenance, we have to do telecommunications, we have to do IT, those kinds of things. So I just kind of look at those and say, historically, that's about the right percentage for stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no doubt. All right, and then how can everyday people, actually, this is wrong. Do you think the physical libraries will always be a part of the future?
Oh, I really do. I really do.
Yeah.
And it's funny. I remember one time I was being interviewed by someone from the Rocky Mountain newspaper, and he was like, "Oh, I'm seeing the internet is coming, and is the library going to survive?" And like 2 weeks after that, the Rocky Mountain News closed as a newspaper.
Oh, no.
And it's like, I think that many people whose business model depends on sale and information like that, much tougher. But the libraries, because there is this reliable funding that comes in through taxes, what happens for businesses if it's bad times, nobody goes to the business because you can't afford it. What happens in the library when it's bad times is more people come to us because we're the only ones who can provide the answer, right? And so I think that this idea that libraries do two key things. One of them, we support individual growth, no matter where you are. You get fired, you want to retool for a new career. You're in school, you want to choose a career. You're taking care of a ailing spouse or parent or something. We always have something for the individual. But then the other side of it, and this is something that I think we struggle with as a society right now. Society is a fun one to say when you live. How do you get people together? And I feel like that idea about building community, if you look at all the stuff that we do that's, programs, and it's children's story times, and it's crafts, and it's speakers, and it's meeting rooms, all those things connect to community.
Absolutely.
And both of those things we're going to need forever.
Yeah.
As a follow-up question, how do you see the new digital developments we're getting? So our online resources like ebooks and audiobooks, some of the extracurricular resources we have like language learning and things like that. How do you think that aids in the physical circulation that we have? So just, you mentioned about people coming in to improve themselves and to learn more. How do you see the benefit of digital collections over just the printed material?
Well, it's an interesting thing. Here's a statistic. As of 2 years ago, more than 50% of our business is now digital. Okay, so that I feel like that's a threshold that we have now passed. Part of it, though, goes into this kind of a complex business analysis of the publishing world. So if I go back to 2010, there were maybe 300,000 books produced every year by the big five publishers, and that's about 85% of most public library collections. And then there would be maybe 60,000 produced by small and independent presses, because they couldn't distribute as far as the big ones. And then there were maybe 10,000 self-published or vanity books. Well, now you move forward, and so today it's 350,000 books from the big five, not much change. From 60,000 to 290,000 of the independent, because they can publish digitally and they can distribute widely. And then from the self-published books, most of them digital, we went from 10,000 a year to over 4 million a year. Okay, so that's the greatest explosion of writing in the history of mankind, and most of it isn't here. We don't have it, right? Because we don't have a way to find out how do you read reviews for 5 million books.
It's not possible.
And who's a distributor, and how do you figure out how all this is? Well, the big five publishers were so afraid of digital collections coming out, they thought it would ruin their business the way that downloading music did for music publishers. And so they imposed a series of very strict conditions on the library. One of them is, I think, who did this first? HarperCollins. If you buy a book and it gets checked out for 26 times, you have to buy it again. Okay? Or if you don't own the book, you're only leasing the book. Or, in the case of, I forget who the other one is, name went out of my head, but if it's like Danielle Steele, if you, as a consumer, if you buy a hardback book, you're going to get libraries get a discount because we're a volume purchaser, no pun intended. But then when they get to digital books, they said, well, we don't think that's fair. So they raised the price by 8 times.
Oh my.
So if we as a library buy a print copy of Danielle Steele, we get a discount. If we buy the digital copy, it costs us $84.
Wow.
Well, what that means over the course of since 2010 is that we have a demand for books. The demand is rising for digital books, but the cost is so much greater, we buy fewer books.
Yeah.
So our inventory is shrinking, and across America, we're seeing kind of a crisis of circulation is shrinking because we don't have as much stuff. We don't talk about that in the library field very often.
No, it's something I'm honestly just getting introduced to as you're mentioning it. I didn't realize that was a thing. How do you feel about that, if I may ask?
Well, I feel like one of the things I would like to see us do is, the idea of the NaNoWriMo, that kind of thing.
Or the GarcoWriMo now.
GarcoWriMo, because they went out of business, right?
Yes.
But I feel like what I would like to do, and in fact, I did this as on the front page of a website when I was in Douglas County. It said, want to write a book? And what we found out is that 99% of the human race will click it. I want to write a book.
Yeah.
And then it says, want to write a good one?
Oh.
Because that's different.
Yeah.
And so then the idea was, okay, well, if you want to be a good author, then first you have to read. What do you want to write? Mysteries? We can help you find the best mysteries. And then you have to start practicing, because if you're going to get good at anything, you got to work at it. But you can't just be writing, banging away at a keyboard or a piano and expect to get better. You need public criticism.
Absolutely.
So we need to get you to a writer's club and have people not just tell you how wonderful you are, but tell you when they're confused.
Yeah.
And then when you finish, it's got to be copy edited, and you're going to want cover art and a final proof at the end to make sure that everything in it is correct. And so if we were to turn, this is like the maker station, but what they're making now are books.
Yes.
And so I feel like that way we could begin to say, so we helped you write it. You're going to give us a copy.
Yes.
Right? And then if more people want it than we have copies, we'll buy extra copies.
Absolutely.
And so I feel like that's the shift from library as consumer outlet for books to library as creator of books.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the right response.
Absolutely. As someone who was part of the GarcoWriMo program and running it, I can't help but talk about it for just a moment. It's so exciting to see writers collectively coming together and helping each other out in terms of, we have a wonderful group here who is very excited to read each other's work and provide genuine feedback, not just, I loved it, but actually oh, this sentence doesn't make sense. And to me, it highlights this thing about the library of, I think many people, when they think of the library, they view it as we're going in and we're getting books. But the library is so much more. It's about connecting people to resources. It's about encouraging people to follow their dreams and their pursuits, whether that's writing, whether that's science, whether, take your pick here. The library is a gateway to a degree into so many worlds. But moving on for the sake of time, if you could leave one legacy in your role as a librarian, what would it be?
Well, it's funny. I think about this, and I think what I have gotten the biggest kick out of is seeing other people become library directors.
Yeah.
And so when I left Douglas County, since then, I added it up the other day, 12 of the people who work for me are now public library directors.
That's so awesome.
And I think just taking that philosophy forward, to kind of like what you were saying, what's the purpose of a library? It's a place where you go to investigate the world.
Yeah.
Just this idea, what a gift we're giving to the whole world, and to have people who really believe in that and have the courage to stand for what libraries stand for.
Yeah.
That's what I believe in.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then how can everyday people help support or advocate for their libraries?
Well, I think the first one is keep learning.
Right? Yeah.
And then to go back to what we were saying before, write a book. Write a really good book. I think that'd be a great idea. And then I think beyond that, it's like, what does it take to be a good citizen today?
Yeah.
And so one of them is subscribe to a local newspaper. Read it. Write letters to the editor about important civic things, because very, very often it's so easy anymore for a few small, very passionate and persistent people to seem like they're a majority. That's because nobody else is speaking up. So ordinary person, write to the newspaper, say, I disagree with that, and I want to say how much I value this. Show up at library board meetings, show up at Board of County Commissioner meetings, be an active, informed citizen.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
without a doubt. I think that media is the only way that we can really truly get to the people, and people can get to the other people. Yeah.
Final question, which is kind of a fun one, something we are tending to ask all of our guests because it's a little silly. If the district was a book, what genre of book do you think it would be?
It would be a Nancy Drew book.
Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah. So Nancy Drew has been around since the 1920s, created by the Stratemeyer Syndicate. And they're beautiful books that they have exactly, I think it's like 180 pages, and every one of them follows a very distinct format. What was so cool about Nancy Drew was that she was this independent teenager who was always sleuthing.
Yeah.
She was going to go off and find the mystery and solve the mystery. Nobody ever got hurt. There was a lot of cleverness going on, but she was courageous and brave and smart. And I feel like if you look at the whole history of American libraries, the reason everybody trusts them is because they're run by Nancy Drews.
Yeah.
They're run by smart, intelligent women who created this social thing to make everybody's life better. So I was with my friend Sharon. We went down to the library, Paonia, I think, and they had a whole bunch of old Nancy Drews. They had some from the 20s and 30s and 40s and 50s and 60s and 70s.
Wow.
That's how long it's been around. And the old ones are better.
The
old ones are much better.
I would agree as someone who's read through a lot of the Nancy Drew books and also played a lot of the Nancy Drew video games, which is a topic for another day. The old books have the real heart in them.
And what I love about them, like they're ideal audiobooks, because like a trip to Denver and back, you can listen to a whole book.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they're really very well plotted, and they're gripping, and something exciting is happening all the time, and they always solve it because they're smart.
Yes. There was a question that we wanted to ask, but we ended up avoiding because we thought it was a bit too much of a question and might take up too much time. What's your big picture vision for the library district? Like in 10 years, if everything went exactly as you would hope it would, what would the library look like?
I guess I really see it like this as for a long time, and this kind of goes back to when I was coming up in libraries, the library was kind of seen as an island.
Yeah.
People visit the library. And when libraries went off and they asked for money, it's like, well, we're wonderful, give us money, and that's all you had to say.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, now I feel like that kind of standoffishness or just focused on your own well-being, it doesn't cut it anymore. And I feel like that, and you've heard me say this before, but I used to believe that it was the job of the community to make a great library. And I realized I had that exactly backward. It is the job of a library to make a great community. And the way that you do that is by constantly being aware of what is our community dealing with, what resources and information do they need, how do we connect the people out here with the resources that will make the community better, and how do we make sure that whenever anybody comes up with the wild idea about improving things, they go, oh wait, we have to get the library here.
Yeah.
Because we know that they can make things happen.
Yes.
So I see us as a community catalyst, and again, as this kind of laboratory for learning for everybody, no matter where you are, who you are, what your background is, or what you're trying to learn.
Absolutely.
Yeah, without a doubt. I think, that's really good and way to view the libraries and to see it in the next 10 years.
And it's like one of the things I've loved watching the staff about this when we started doing community interviews.
Yes.
And people are like, oh, I don't know how to do that, or what does that have to do with the library?
Yeah.
And then they would come back and they say, we could help them.
Right,
Yeah.
yes. You come back with like a lot of more insight of like what's really going on.
Yeah.
How many problems are going on. I think
Exactly.
when we interviewed the high school, we didn't realize how big of a gap there is between people who are speaking Spanish.
That's right.
And and having elementary school education and
Right.
they're in high school at this moment.
Right.
And it was like seeing the community in a different lens at that point.
Honestly, the community interviews are one of my favorite things we've done at the job, even though I wouldn't have expected it. Actually going out and talking to our community members about what's happening in our town. As much as we're in kind of a small town and you think you maybe know everyone, there are so many things all happening at once.
Right.
And it's wonderful how many resources the library can provide to these individuals, whether it's, connecting with a digital resource, giving them a space to meet in one of our rooms, or helping them with research, or one of my favorite things to do is to go through our old newspaper collection and find stuff from the 20s for people's research projects. It's so fun.
It's really fun. I love when we get those newspapers
it's one of the
because you learn more about the history and kind of like within this town what's gone on even before.
Well,
you
I
get
think
here.
the thing I always think about this is that, having worked as a reference librarian too, the hard part is not answering the question. The The hard part is figuring out what the question is.
Yeah.
Oh, that absolutely.
That,
You know?
I think that's one thing that I've realized as a librarian starting here is like you get a question, but you don't really understand the question
Yeah.
until you're truly trying to figure out what is going to be answered.
And so now go from the individual to the community. So the community has questions, and it would never occur to them to take it to the library.
Yeah.
So we have to leave the library to
To-
go talk to them and understand what the question is, and then we can help them solve it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I have a question that's not on the list, but just is prompted based off of what we were talking about. You kind of touched on this already, but what is your opinion on the library's impact or need to do for outreach? So things such as obviously going out and doing these community interviews. How else do you see the library going out into the community itself?
So there was a period when I was trying to figure out exactly that issue, and we said, okay, so round one, find every group that you can, and go out and visit them, and kind of be visible and say, okay, how can we help you? And then very quickly realize, well, everybody wants us. Everybody would appreciate the help. We can't provide support for every organization. So then it's like, okay, so now let's go back to say, how do you pour that through the mission of the library? Where can we really add value? Where does it make sense that we're stepping into that? So then you get a partnership like, raising a reader. So it's very much about early literacy. It's about reaching out to a part of the population that has not been well represented in the library. And so that kind of outreach is like, how do we advance literacy through thoughtful partnerships?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Do you have any questions relating to Spanish services or anything like that? That might be good to ask.
Yeah. So, how have you seen the projection of like our outreach with the Hispanic community, and where do you want to see it continuing going? I think that we've had this conversation with the SST team, and we had that kind of like, where do we've succeeded a lot, and where do you see us going now that we've succeeded in a lot of our goals?
Well, I think in a lot of ways it goes back to did we define the problem correctly? And so even back when I was first interviewing for the job, I said, I'm looking at 30% population across the board, 60% in the schools.
Yeah.
Our staff didn't look like that. Our collection doesn't look like that. Our programming doesn't look like that. So you say, and this is like an existential thing for me. If we want to be successful as an institution, if we want to thrive, we have to demonstrate that we can reach out to everybody, and that anybody who comes here can find something. So if you're Spanish speaking and you come in and there are no Spanish materials, you go, this institution is not for me.
Exactly.
And so I really feel that kind of outreach isn't just because, it's hip or it's DEI or something. It's because it is essential to our survival. If we're trying to make sure that our community thrives, we have to meet them where they are.
Yes.
Absolutely.
And so then if I divide, I think the way that we set up the committees under the Spanish services team, so we've got collections and have made extraordinary progress there. What does the end of that look like? Something like representative to the number of people in our community that speak that language.
Yeah.
Okay. Staff, same thing. I think when I got here, we had 2 Spanish speakers in the district, and now it's like we have at least 1 or 2 at every branch.
Exactly,
That's
yeah.
progress. That's progress. And then getting into, and that means everything from recruitment to retention to growing leaders. So I want everybody on the Spanish services team to go off and become a director.
Yeah.
And then the idea about programming and outreach is that, it's not enough just to promote every program in 2 languages if they show up and it's only in English.
Yeah.
So we have to build our capacity to deliver programs that are that way.
Absolutely.
And then I think that ultimately it's like what I really want, and it's just like the motto on the website, find your story. And I want everybody in the community to say, I've got my story, and I could find breadcrumbs, that took me to it at the library and helped me find my voice.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, I do see that you have really put in a lot of work within the Spanish community, and I think just seeing how we've thrived and then how you're allowing us to thrive, I really do want to say thank you for that, because really it's being a part of the Spanish service team has been really my success story here at the library.
It's one of our institution's biggest successes.
Yeah.
I would agree.
Yeah.
Do you have any other questions, Rebecca?
No, I think we're good. Yeah.
I have one more question that's a little bit self-serving just because I have you here, but I'm curious on your thoughts. What are your thoughts on audiobooks and graphic novels in video games as literature? There's a lot of debate of like, well, my child needs to start reading real books instead of those darn graphic novels.
I started out, I learned to read on comic books, and my quip there is that I was the only 6-year-old in my block who could spell invulnerable. Right? Okay. So it builds vocabulary. It teaches you storytelling. It teaches you to imagine yourself inside somebody else's life. That's the beginning of empathy.
Absolutely.
And so I love graphic novels. I truly think, as a mostly superhero kind of reading fan, some of the best writing in the world is coming out of comic books.
I would agree.
Neil Gaiman, the whole Sandman series, all that stuff. I mean, there's some wonderful, wonderful writing and some wonderful artwork that happens there.
I know, absolutely. One of my favorite graphic novel series in the world started out as a webtoon called Lore Olympus. It's an adult graphic series that talks about Greek mythology in more of a contemporary setting, but as an artist as well, seeing how I'm gonna be so mad at myself if I get the author wrong. I believe it's Rachel Smith. Seeing how Rachel Smith, thank you so much. Seeing how Rachel Smith uses color theory and how she uses watercolor techniques and different kinds of illustration styles to show what's happening in the scene fills me with such delight, because not only are you getting this beautiful contemporary take on Greek mythology, so you're learning about history here, you're also learning about art history, you're learning about color theory, and you're having an enjoyable experience. I obviously am so passionate about graphic novels, and I think they're such an asset in the library.
Well, literacy is literacy.
Literacy is literacy.
It doesn't matter to me.
Yeah, right. It's like Red says, no matter what you're reading. You're actually putting some words into your brain.
And you start where people are interested.
Yeah.
If they're interested in a comic book kind of format, great, start there.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's all about reading comprehension, understanding what you're reading, grasping the story, grasping what's going to happen.
I know there are a lot of people, I'm probably one of them, who my first exposure to Moby Dick or to the Count of Monte Cristo was a Classics Illustrated comic book.
Yeah.
And then after that you read this, go, I'm going to read the real thing.
Right? Yeah. You get so motivated that you want to do the real thing. Yeah.
There's a newer series called the Manga Classics that does the same thing, but does it in the style of manga, which is the Japanese graphic novels.
Yeah.
And it's a similar thing of you can sit down and read it real fast, and then suddenly you're interested in reading the actual
Yeah, you go,
text.
that's a really interesting story.
Yeah.
What about audiobooks? I also hear a lot of patrons say, well, audiobooks aren't real reading because you're listening to it.
I know. It's like
It's ridiculous.
Ridiculous, right?
Well, it's like we are wired for story.
Yes.
And I think we're wired for voice. That's why podcasts, I think, survive.
Absolutely.
Because you get to listen to, you pick up something different from the sound of the human voice.
Absolutely.
And I think and here in, the odd thing to me, having lived in Chicago and Denver and then living on the West Slope, I spend way more time in a car here. When you live in the city, you're walking everywhere. So for me, an audiobook is essential. And so I go through probably 2 a month, 2 or 3 a month.
Yeah. I mean, I've spent my entire month just reading audiobooks while I'm, working on a project in the back, and then just putting in my headphones or working at anything at home. I'm just like, let's listen to Harry Potter at this moment.
Well, and Harry Potter just happens to be one of the best read of the whole series.
Absolutely.
But it's funny to me too. It's like at many American Library Association conferences, they have people who show up in their voice.
Voice actors.
They're artists,
Yeah.
And they have fans, it's like, I have no idea what you look like. I don't even care what your book is about.
Yeah.
I just, whisper into my ear all night.
Yeah.
Yes,
It's very soothing. I feel like it's helped a lot with my own kind of anxieties and being like, everything's fine. Just have an audiobook on hand and you'll be fine.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
It also makes cleaning the house a lot more tolerable.
Yeah. Goes by faster.
Yes. Thank you so much for joining us, Jamie. It was a pleasure to interview you. Do you have any final words or thoughts that you would like to say to our dear patrons?
Well, I look forward to the international success of this podcast.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.